Hi, my name's Michael Crawford. I'm your training instructor for this demonstration. Today we're going to cover required modelling data. So during the usage of the Steel Designer Pro, there has to be data in the back end and file naming that is in play. And that particular data and the file naming in play is used in the automation processes within the application. So it's important to know what they are, and it's also important to know how to fix them if there is an issue, or how to put them in if you need to put them in. So I'm going to cover those in great detail. So the required modeling data for all of our components that we work on is really simple and easy. So I'm about to go into that and I'll show you what they are. If we go back to the previous project that I created, in this particular instance there is simply just sections in the job. I'm going to put in some bits and pieces in here that will create more components. So if we go to the parts, I'm going to put a plate in here. Now you can put plates in at zone level, you can put them at any level. So I've just selected a plate that comes from the library. I could have just gone with the basic default one, and I'm going to insert it at the origin. So there's a plate component. I'm just going to move that out the road and put it over to the side and fix it in its location. Just out of habit, I like to fix things or have things locked to driving sketches. At the moment I'm just putting it out to the side so we've got a plate, so we can show you what's inside a plate and how plate data works. The other item that needs to be added is obviously fasteners. So let's have a look at how fasteners data works as well. So I'm going to insert some fasteners. So if we go down to the plate, this is obviously not what you would do, but I'm just putting them in there so that you can see what they are. So obviously if we change these settings, the bolt or fastener will be added at a certain level. So in this particular case, all fasteners have been added to the zone. You can see them here. Okay. Last but not least, there are others, but the main ones are plates, sections, and then the last being vendor. So we can open up a vendor item, and in here you can see I've got different pieces of vendor items that I've created as I've gone by. In Australia we have our own supplier that supplies us vendor items for handrailing components. So I'm just going to insert one of those at the origin. Okay, so let's have a look and see what's inside the data of all of these items. Simply put, if you wanted to see them without opening them, we have a nice little tool that allows us to select the face of a component and go view the component data. And in here you can see the data that's associated to that section. If we want to toggle it, and it is a toggle, off and on, we just select it again. If we select the plate and view the component data, there is component data in there. And we'll get into the data for each item as we go. And if we select the vendor item, you can see there is hardly any vendor data in there. Now this is a deliberate item that I wanted to show you why there isn't any data in there and what data should be in there. Okay, so if we were to consolidate to collect the data and put it into our consolidation tree, you'll be seeing all sorts of things. So right now, if we go update custom properties and click on consolidate, that collects all the items in the tree. So right now you can see we've got a plate, we've got our sections, and we've got our vendor item. We can, if we untick this, switch between the sections, the plates, and the vendor item. On large projects, consolidation, you would not select each one of these, you would select just all and have them all in here. So right now you can see that there is plate, and it gives you the size and the length and how many are in the project. Same goes with the sections, and you can see here there are 8 of section 1, 3 of section 2, and you can see that the grade has come through because the grade data is part of the section and the way that the section's weldment profile is filed. So if you look at the vendor item, you can see that it's called up that it's a vendor type P stanchion and it's got a length, and there's one of them. but no grade. Okay, if your supplier requires a grade, if your supplier supplies a grade for your item, then obviously you can put the grade in. So let's have a look, and we'll open up the vendor item and have a look at what's in there. So right now we've got the three basics that you require, but there's one more that's missing, and that will tell us which one it is. So if we select my pull down, I've set these up by default. I would suggest you set these up as default as well. That means that these are all available to you. I'm just going to mention model type now so that you're aware of it. Now, model type, there are three components that we use throughout our application that are important. They are vendors, that's this component, as you can see in the name. There are sections, and there are plates. So in this case, for our model type, we need to type in capitals, vendors. When we type in vendors, it tells the database through firing the Steel Designer Pro data link here that this is a vendor item, and it will populate it with all the other data that is required when we rebuild. Now that that's in there, I do a Control Q and a Control S, and now you'll see that there is more data that's been added to the vendor item. Now, vendor items have descriptions, lengths, and weight, okay, in their system by default, but you have to add them yourself manually because they are vendor items. The information that goes in here is up to you to put in. It's not automated because every single vendor item has its own description and length. Okay, it's important, even if the item itself doesn't have a length, to put a 0 in there for calculations. The 0 is important because you need a value, and it has to be a number in order to get the length. It can be a formula linked to a dimension for the length too, so just be mindful that you can do that as well. Now you'll notice that there are some other values that have been added here. This is all part of the data link collecting the information and putting it into the custom properties automatically. So that vendor item now has all of its data. The only one that we're missing is the grade. So if you go back, you'll notice that grade is missing. You can put in your own grade. In this case, there is no grade, so I'm just going to leave it blank. Make sure that your vendor items have their data in them so that when you do add them to the library, the data doesn't have to be put in them after, which can be dangerous because when you go to insert your vendor items over and over again, then the data will have to be added to all of those components. So just make sure that your vendor item has all of its data before it goes into the library. And if it does go into the library and it's missing the data, I would suggest you open it up in the library and fix it straight away. Let's have a look at a section. We'll open up a section here. Okay, sections are pretty straightforward. This one's got a lot more information that the others have. You'll also notice that the mark has been applied. The mark has been applied because before I actually consolidated it and then used the tools in the consolidation process to apply the mark to the custom properties. You'll notice that we have a standard. You'll also notice that up the top we have a model type, okay, of section. It can be section or sections, but I usually stick to the same name as the file so that we've got sections in there. Okay, so if we look at what's actually in here, all these items here, right through up to mark, can be deleted just to demonstrate what happens. If I hit Control Q, Control S, you'll see that that data has been re-added. So if we look at this, you can see that this is the weldment profile standard, this is the weldment profile type, this is the grade to which it has been taken from, and this is the section size. Okay, in a weldment profile, the section size is the configuration because we use configuration type weldment profiles, so that's what happens there. And of course the usual stuff that you would have seen in the vendor item is also in the section. Because this is a section, the process from the data link works out that it's a weldment because it's got a weldment feature in it, and then it grabs the section data from the cut list, which is cut list item 1. So you're going to make sure that this is cut list item 1 for it to work, otherwise your length will not evaluate and you'll end up with a formula as a value for your length. If you see inside your consolidation pane a formula rather than a length, you need to open the component up and you need to fix this so that it is item 1. Now to do that's quite simple really. If you click on this, click on the cut list item and then select the cut list automatically and turn it off, right? And when you right mouse click, you can see that everything's turned off. Then you can simply just do a Control Q, Control S, and then delete it. So if you select the actual cut list item and then delete it, it'll go back to the body. Now there is no cut list item, so we've actually refreshed it. And then if you click on the cut list and then go create cut list items automatically, it will now be in there. Now if this was a 2, 3 or 4 or 5, it means that you put a section in, you've deleted it, you've put another section in, or you've changed it and it's skipped the 1. So what basically happens is the Steel Designer Pro data link collects this information and passes it into the custom properties. So the length, more than likely, if it's not right, it'll come up 0. As you can see, there's nothing in there. You will get a formula for it. So just letting you know that that needs to be a value. So now that I've actually created the cut list item, and then I go back out and I do a Control Q and a Control S, the length will come in, as you can see. And the length is not a formula, it's calculated based on the copy of the cut list item's length. So that's the section. Let's have a look at the plate. All plates in the Steel Designer Pro are drawn on the top plane. Now on the top plane means that they can be offset, mid-plane, or extruded in either direction. Plates are typically flat, so it's important that you draw them on the top plane for them to be captured. The data that is formed inside the plate information is based on the direction of the plate and the plate's extrusion direction, I should say. Now plates are a bit different again. They are just an extruded boss. They can be even a mirrored component, but consider that the mirrored components must have the same file name. Okay, so if you do mirror things, just be wary that the file name must match that if you mirror. Now that means that you may mirror into a component, but you need to rename the component to something that works like that. I don't suggest you mirror, but if you can't avoid it, mirroring can be quite an interesting process. Prefixes and suffixes, you want to try and avoid creating new components, but if you do, you'll have to pack and go them and fix them. Okay, we don't have any processes in place at this stage to handle mirrored components, but you can mirror components. So just be wary that you need to have a file name that matches our system in order for a mirror to work. Now I've probably just digressed a little bit, but let's get back to the plate. Now if we look at a plates data, you can see here that a plate pretty much has the same custom properties. Obviously model type is plates. We have the standard, the grade, the length, and the description. So everything from down here, as far as plates are concerned, are pretty much is replaced when I do a rebuild. So if I was to delete any of those items, you can see that they will go. So if I select them and then go delete, and then get out and save it, and then do a Control Q, Control S, you can see that the information is added back in. So what happens is that with a plate, the bounding box is collected. So we've got the width, then the depth, and then the length. So you will always get the smallest of the, it'll organize the in a sorting order of the bounding box dimensions, and it will then process it in such a way that the smallest is always the thickness, the width is always the middle second value, and then the length is always the largest distance. So in this case, you can see that that particular plate's information has been collected. Now let's talk about the grade. So for the grade for a plate, if you want to put the grade in for a plate, we have plate specifications. Plate specifications are important, and they are used because sometimes we use different grades of plates, and because of the system being automated, we want to be able to collect which plates are which grade. So in order to do that, we save the plate. Okay, so we've saved the plate. Now we're going to go and have a look at the plate specifications for the project. So if you go to projects, open the project command center up, go to projects. This is the current project that we're working on right now. That's the current zone that we have open. If you go to project specifications, and in here, this is where we can add plate specifications. Now, the plate thickness is important because it's going to capture the plate thickness. I did not capture the plate thickness, but my guess is that it's a 12 thick plate because we use 12 thick plates for a lot in Australia, and 10 thick. 10 thick's the default. So I'm going to add a 12 thick plate standard. So in this case, I've added by clicking on add plate specification. I'm going to put in the thickness and then the grade. In Australia, our grades are based on Australian standards. At the moment, for the top of my memory, I'm not sure which one that is, but if I just put in AS, and that way you know that this is an Australian standard grade, and it's usually 200, so I'm just going to put in 200 or 250. So 250, and then hit my enter key, and then go update my specifications. So now that specification for that plate's grade has been applied. I close off everything, come back to my zone assembly, click on my update custom properties, and then go consolidate. And by default, it's picked up the grade at the end because it's picked it up from the plate specifications. So now that information has been added because I ticked on update custom properties. If I was to open this plate up and have a look at it, you'll see that the custom properties of the grade has been applied just through a rebuild. The same thing also applies with the grade under the part. So if I go back to the part and remove the fact that the grade is no longer something, we will clean it out and then hit the rebuild button, and the plate specification is also applied through the rebuild on the data link. So when we rebuild at the assembly level and we have the update custom properties turned on, the Steel Designer Pro data link is fired in the feature tree, and it automatically populates the grade as well. So they're the three main components that are collected during our process for working. Most of everything else that we use, such as driving sketches, have an envelope and are excluded from bill of materials. Our fasteners are excluded from the bill of materials. So our fasteners are treated just like a driving sketch, but they are collected by our reporting system based on their name being fasteners. Now basically what happens is our fasteners are a different beast all of their own. Because they are envelopes, they are excluded from bill of materials, and when we bring these items into drawings, they disappear in our drawings. However, you can turn them on in your drawings and you can add notes to them. So just so that you're aware, if I open up the fastener, fasteners are fairly simple in the fact that they are driven by our database. So if you look at the custom properties, all these custom properties drive the information associated to that component. And the database, when we insert or change the bolt by going to its fastener properties and changing them and selecting them from the information that comes from the database, this information automatically updates. Seeing that it is a fastener and it's excluded from the bill of materials, it has its own process separate from the vendor, the part, and the section. So if we wanted to change the size of this fastener, we simply click on the fastener, and you can see in the same process they're all the same, so we only need to select one fastener. So you go to modify fastener by selecting a face, and in here we can change the fastener size. So if we go to an M16, you can see here that when I hit my tick, the fastener will automatically update to an M16. The component itself, if we go back and have a look at its properties, you can see that the length and it has been modified in the description. This information comes from the database, and the length is automatically applied based on the minimum extension from the ply to the tail of the bolt to allow for a nut and a washer. In this particular case, the nut and the washer is just a simple nut and washer, so in the description you can see that it's complete with one nut and one washer. However, the length is also a separate property as well. If I was to place this project into a drawing by simply adding it to a drawing, if I go new, drawing, click OK, I'm going to make it an AO. I'm just using SolidWorks typical drawing process here, and if I click on top view and side view, you can see by default SolidWorks turns off enveloped items. If you want to show your enveloped items, you can by clicking on the view and then going to the properties of that view. Down the bottom here there is show envelope. You can tick the show envelope on. Now the envelope is shown on, you can see that the fasteners have come through. Now if it's a parent of the view, it would automatically do all views. Another thing to remember is that because we have the fastener data behind the fastener, you can add notes and link it to the fastener data. So we're going to add a note, add it to the custom properties by selecting the link to property. We're going to go to the component, and now we can go to description, and we now have the description of the bolt. So in your general arrangements you can call up what this bolt is. So if I was to select that, double click on it, I can change that, and I can also change the way that it's displayed. So now you can see that I have bolts called up here under the annotation. The quantity unfortunately does not come through, so you may have to add a quantity at the front of your note to let you installers, steel erectors know that that's how many bolts need to be applied. The length and the description of the bolt gets captured. We do not use numbering for our bolts or our fasteners, and this will go back to the reports for fasteners. We cover reports later down the track, and fasteners are and can be related back from where used, which tells us where the bolts are used in which member, and also the bolts themselves can be allocated to project, they can be allocated to connections, and they can be allocated to welded members. So where the where used report will tell you is where those bolts actually are used. So if you call them up in your general arrangement, that's just one way of doing them. So I think I've pretty much covered the required modeling data, the data link feature that we've got in the tree, and the component types, plates, sections and vendor items, and we've done a consolidation data check. So when we do this, this is our consolidation data check. We want to make sure that all the data has come through that we require to go into our bill of materials. If this information happens to be not correct, your bill of materials will not fire. You need to ensure that this information is correct and that all the data has come through. So data handling issues is one of those things that you have to do, and it will happen. So just be wary that there are processes in play. If you find that a data link does not fire for any particular reason in any of those components, simply delete it and rebuild it. And hit Control S, Control Q, and then Control S, and it will then populate the data. We found that with our customer that you can delete the feature for the data link, and then it will put it back in when you hit Control Q, Control S, and that allows it to be a new feature, and it will rebuild. This is quite a strange scenario, but it does happen, so be aware of it. I think that pretty much covers the required data. If you want to add more data to any of your files, we have a tool that allows us to batch add data. So if you go batch custom properties under our tools and select that, click import files, and now in this particular interface we can select which files we want to add extra data to. So we can grab the file type head, grab the beams and expand that out, and in every beam I'm going to add another bit of data. So in this case, if I go through, I can add new field, click on add new field, and then we can go test, and this is batch adding, new test, click add. So what's happened now, after closing the interface, we can go to, and we did add the custom properties to the welded members. If you have a look, it was the assemblies, and if we go and open up the assembly, the new test has been applied to all of those welded members. That's a pretty handy tool, and you can populate lots of data very quickly with that. Let's say for instance you wanted to add a part number, or a particular item number, or a number that needs to be shown on drawings. You can populate all of your items in one go. So that is the end of this demonstration on required modeling data. If you have any questions, please send a request to support@cadcraftsman.com. We would be happy to help you.